So let's get back to finishing our trunk. Now we took a break from the trunk to do the canopy, and the reason for that is I feel the overall big read of the tree is more important than the up close, and because of that I'm just more antsy to get that part out of the way. You know, the silhouette, the canopy from a distance is just the part that concerns me more, therefore that's the part I decided to tackle first. So now I'm coming back to the trunk. And the first thing I'm going to do is get rid of this horrible UV stretching. Since I had clicked apply mapping for most of my lofts, I think I did it all except for one I forgot, and it's going to be a nightmare. You know, you see I have these real clean UVs, and all I need to do is scale them correctly. So to do that, I need my checker pattern to see if my UVs are proportional. And the goal here, if you've never seen this checker pattern before, is to get all these checkers to be squares, and that way I know that my UVs are proportional. So you see the one branch there is just kind of flickering. It doesn't have any squares on it. That's because I forgot to hit apply mapping on it, and it will be a nightmare to unwrap at this point. So now you'll see that all my checkers are different sizes. They're not perfect squares, but they're more or less. And for that, I'm going to use this real neat button, which is exclusive to Max 2012. It's called Rescale Elements. And what it does is it's going to make all your island sizes proportional to each other, resulting in all of your squares being roughly the same size. So if you don't have 2012, it's going to be a lot harder for you. You're going to have to go through and rescale each island manually until all the checkers are all the same size. So you'll see that now every branch, the checker pattern is more or less the same size, which is really cool. And by the way, this crappy noisy bark texture is a throwaway. I just grabbed it, and like the first bark texture I saw, I just dropped it in there just for something. The real bark texture crafting can only begin, I feel, once I'm in the engine and I'm looking at my tree as it was meant to be seen. So now I have this little nightmare branch to deal with that I forgot to press apply mapping for, and I tried to unwrap it in Max for a tiny bit, and then I decided that Blender had a tool much more suitable for the job, so I took it over to Blender. I'm not going to show that stuff because I think it's just, well, hopefully you guys don't forget to press apply mapping on any of your branches. But Blender has a tool called Follow Active Quads, and it works really well for this kind of thing. So I'm just going to skip through that part. So now I'm swapping out my crappy placeholder bark texture for a slightly less crappy placeholder bark texture. And you'll notice that the part I extruded back when I was making the trunk in part 1 obviously has UV stretching because it was, you know, after the loft. So I'm just grabbing those verts right there and just dragging them down to remedy that. And now I've jumped into the engine. I've exported my tree to the engine. I just skipped over it and taken a gander at what I have, and it looks real bad. So jumping into Photoshop, doing some quick levels, desaturated a little bit. I do this kind of stuff a lot, and I only make these kinds of judgments, as I've said before, when I'm looking at it in the game engine. So that looks a little bit better, but still a long way to go. I'm not even sure at this point if I'm going to go with this texture or not. By the way, this bark does have a normal map right now. It's something I just threw through Crazy Bump. We have a separate tutorial for Crazy Bump if you'd like to learn more about that. So my trunk is extremely cylindrical, and upon looking at reference, I realized that trunks are not like that. So what I'm doing now is I'm attempting to give this trunk a little bit more like rootedness at the bottom, as if the bottom were to branch off into roots. And the way I'm doing that is just by making some simple cuts. as you see me doing here, and pushing out some of the verts. So I think that's a good way to add a lot of quick rootiness to the base of your trunk, just by simply making some of those cuts and pushing and pulling some verts. And that's already looking a lot more trunk-like, in my opinion. Very nice. Okay, now I'm moving on to that pesky branch that I forgot to hit apply mapping. Is just kind of, well, first of all, I don't think it's round enough, so with a few simple cuts, I'm making it rounder. Just at the base of the trunk where it meets the tree, because of course there you have a silhouette, and there its non-roundness is really showing itself. Another problem with this branch here is that it's just kind of cladding into the side of the tree, which of course trees, that just doesn't happen. It would actually, in a real tree, it would actually grow out. You know, it would be like it would be one piece. It wouldn't look like one other piece just mashed into it. So now I have to solve that problem. And to do that, I'm just going to cut a hole for the branch and then weld in the verts, which is kind of a tricky process. So I'm just cutting around, trying to match it as closely as possible, and cutting off that excess branch there. And now I'm just going to use target weld and just weld that bad boy in. Things are getting pretty treacherous around this area. And of course I just try to make, for each vert I have on my branch, I want to make one vert to weld to on the tree. So now it's all welded in. And it doesn't look quite contiguous, certainly not as contiguous as I'd like, but better than before. The last thing I'm going to do here is add one more little bulbousy, rooty thing higher up on the trunk, just to try to fight some of that cylindricalness. For any tree you're doing, you definitely don't want to have the trunk super cylindrical. You're always going to want to add some kind of rootiness to any tree you're doing. Another way of doing it, and probably a more effective way, would be to use ZBrush. The lofts give us even quads, so it'd be real easy to export an OBJ into ZBrush and sculpt on it, and then use Decimation Master to get it back down. You could possibly bake a normal map, although in CryEngine it would be a little trickier since you don't have multiple UV channels, because we're going to need the tiling bark, and that can't really be a unique UV. But there are some sneaky ways you can get a macro normal in there, such as using the detail bump slot. But with triangle counts no longer being as important as they were in the olden days, you could also just have a fairly high poly trunk and let the geometry carry all of those gnarly bumps and details. So there we have it. I'm calling this done. I think it turned out pretty nice. I especially like its silhouette. It looks good from afar. It has a nice read, which is the most important thing to me. However, it's not perfect. Some critiques I have for it are, I think the base of the trunk could be a bit gnarlier. A ZBrush pass with Decimation Master might propel this tree to another level, I think. The bark texture could use a bit of work and or a different texture altogether. Some of the kinks are jarring and could use polish, and the low-level joints where the large branches meet the trunk are pretty rough as well. But all in all, I'm pretty happy with it. But I think it could still be better. I think it could always be better. I'm too lazy to do all those things, but you guys should make an even better one. But if you do make a better one, please try to make it not that much better. Because if it's a lot better, then I'll be really sad. Nah, I'm just kidding. Well, thank you all so much for watching, and I hope you all enjoyed it. And most importantly, I hope you all learned some stuff.